Welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I am thrilled to have as my guest today, Dedoceo Habi. Dedoceo, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on board and to share and learn.
I appreciate that. So Dedoceo is a disabled veteran. He's on the side of taking charge of one's life and getting better. His book is titled Memoirs in the Moment, and he wants to give voice to those who are living productively with post-traumatic stress disorder and to help change the paradigm of thinking around PTSD. Memoirs in the Moment is an honest portrayal of the intersection between service to others and the impact of PTSD in the life of one service member who served in Beirut. The book represents an honest look at the motivations, thoughts, and perspectives that challenge Mr. Habi daily and some of the ways he has learned to cope. All right, Dedoceo, welcome once again. Before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Sure. Again, thank you. So I'm from Savannah, Georgia. I'm a country boy at heart. We lived up and down the East Coast throughout my life and development as a child. I ended up where I am today, which is in the Los Angeles area.
Okay. So, where to begin here? Well, let me put that to you. How did all this start for you? First of all, talk a little bit about your entry into the service.
Sure. So I graduated high school at the age of 16 in Savannah, Georgia. And then I went to college by the time I was 17, but the environment that I was in just did not resonate with who I was at my core. At about the same time, one of my classmates had just got back from Marine Corps boot camp. And when I saw the change in him, I knew the second I saw him, that's the route I wanted to take. So by the time, by the end of that year, actually, I had enlisted and was making plans to get to Parris Island to begin my journey as a Marine. So I was motivated by the evolution I saw in one of my classmates, one of my close friends and classmates.
What was it specifically that you saw?
I saw that he possessed himself in a way that I thought was admirable. He was self-aware. He was clear what his next step in life was. And he just resonated a certain confidence that I did not have.
Sounds good to me. I think we all could use some of that.
Yes.
So what happens? How do things unfold?
Yeah, so I was going to the Marine Corps. I had just turned 18 when I went in. I was 17 when I signed up. And I ended up in Jacksonville, North Carolina. By the time I was 19 years old, I found myself on a Mediterranean cruise where we spent our time. This was 1983, and we ended up spending our time off the coast of Beirut, Lebanon. We were there as a part of a multinational peacekeeping force. A lot of different nations were involved in trying to create enough space so that the Lebanese people could create a stable government and govern themselves. But those that were against it decided that that was not something they wanted to happen. So on the morning of 23 October 1983, a terrorist came in and blew up the barracks, killing 241 service members. I happened to be on the Iwo Jima at the time, where we processed a lot of the wounded and some that didn't make it. Then they asked for volunteers to go in to retrieve any other personal effects or anything else that we might encounter there. I volunteered to go in. And then
let me, if I may. So I just want to get clear on where. So the barracks blew up, or was blown up, and where were you at the time?
At the time it exploded, I was on the Iwo Jima. We were off the coast, about 2, 3 miles off the coast. The moment it happened, and shortly thereafter, we pulled up anchor and came in closer to the
Okay.
shoreline so that we could bring the wounded and deceased in a lot more quickly.
Okay. And then you also volunteered to go back.
Right. Volunteered to go in to recover any personal effects or anything else we found. And so I went in, and that's when I got fired upon. Sniper fire coming our way, that kind of thing. And then shortly thereafter, there was some explosions as well that went on. Shortly thereafter, we got the call to return back to base and then process us back on board.
Wow. So they were waiting for people to go back in and help.
Yeah.
And oh my God. Okay. So what happens next?
Well, as a result of that, that's when my change occurred. I was not aware of it, of course. To me, I know I was consumed by a certain anger. What I saw, it was surreal. It was, one could never imagine that they would be exposed to such things. I'll put it to you that way. The things you hear, the smells, and so on and so forth, they haunt you.
Mm.
So afterwards, we went back to work as we did during those days. We never talked about anything, but as we did back in those days, and it was like nothing ever happened. But the change had occurred to me, and as a result, I was a different person. I had a very short wick, if you will. Always angry, always wanting to attack, always, and also that was compounded by a feeling of hopelessness that was consuming me.
How old were you at this time,
I was
Dedoceo?
19,
Jeez.
19 years old. 19 years old.
And so after, as you said, there was no quote unquote processing of this for you on how this may have impacted the people who went back?
Exactly.
Oh, man.
No processing. And so ultimately I got out the Marine Corps. I had developed a really bad attitude around the Marine Corps because of the fact that we felt so helpless and we saw the results of this sense of helplessness in real time. We were exposed to it in real time. And so I got out. And for the next 30 years or so, I lived with PTSD undiagnosed. And because of that, my life was a series of terrible tragedies that happened. I was homeless 3 times. Married multiple times.
So any understanding of what was going on? Like, oh my God, something's going on? Or did you sense a change in yourself?
I was not aware of the change. In fact, when I got back home from Beirut, my youngest brother, who could clearly see the change, told me I had gone crazy, told me something was wrong and that I need to talk to someone. And my response was, there's nothing wrong with me. Everyone else has a problem, and that's something they got to deal with. I ain't got to worry about it. And I kept moving. So I was in denial for many, many years. As a result, of course, again, my life was a series of ups and downs, a lot of tragedies along the way, a lot of ruined relationships. I pushed away everyone who I valued. It was a really bad situation. I reached a really low point, and finally, my wife, she said to me in the only a way that only she could, that I need to go and talk to someone. I have been having nightmares, night tremors, and such all these years, and no one had ever told me. She told me. And it really surprised me that she would be that honest with me about it. And so out of, okay, I'll go do it kind of thing. I'm still in denial about my situation. So I'll go talk to someone. So I went to a local vet center in Philadelphia. And within the span of one meeting, it was clear that there was something really tragic going on with me. They had me going in twice a week from that moment until I started gaining some control over things. They slowly started educating me around what was actually happening, why it was happening. I had to learn the different tools to cope with it over time. It didn't happen overnight, of course.
What was your reaction? How did you uh, take it when this therapist said to you, this might be PTSD from what happened? How did that go down?
Well, initially it was like, okay, even if it is PTSD, I'll just get this treatment and then I'll be fine.
I'll be good.
Boy, was I wrong with that, right? So what actually happened was after maybe I'd say about a month or two while we were in conference, I shared with her, I said, well, I'll be glad when we finish this therapy so that I can finally move on with my life. And then she said, well, I just want to be clear with you about something. She said, you're going to have to deal with this the rest of your life. That's what PTSD is. It's something that you have to manage the rest of your life. And I cried. I cried because I had been living with such misery, so this darkness that just consumed my soul, um, constant feeling of anger, all these different, and I wasn't aware that I could learn a different way. So it just really it was one of the lower points in my recovery, if you will, because it forced me to really look at myself in the mirror and ask if I had the mustard, if you will, to keep this fight going and do my due diligence to create a plan to manage and mitigate some of the impact of PTSD in my life.
Wow. First of all, I just want to pause here and, thank you for coming on here and sharing this story. I mean, I think it takes a lot of guts to do that. And it's just friggin' crazy that, here in America, this is still going on, the treatment of veterans. From what you're saying about that particular point with the therapist, when she let you know that this was going to be a long journey for you, it sounded like she was giving you some straight news.
Yeah.
Was there also some hope in that, in terms of, well, there's a way to move forward?
Well, one of the things that, once she saw my reaction, she was very understanding, very compassionate towards me, and very supportive. And one thing she did say is that while it may seem like this is something that is overwhelming, that you just can't overcome it, just know that if you do the work, things will get better.
Mm.
And I held on to that. If I do the work, I had to give it a shot, because the alternative was that again, more misery, more living in this dark place, which had an outcome that was not favorable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did the work.
Were you, if I may ask, were you using substances?
I wasn't using it. Well, that's not true. I drank.
Okay.
I drank. I guess I drank a little bit more than I care to admit sometimes. For me, it was more about trying, like, for instance, there was a time when I lived in Oakland that my thing was to walk the streets with my gun because I was looking for a way out.
A way out, meaning that could
In
be a
other
couple
words,
things.
you get into a gunfight with someone and they kill you, you kill them. I was at that point in my life where there was nothing, no light in me that I could see.
Wow.
But again, I got past that. And then, in fact, right after that time is when I met my wife and later moved to Philadelphia, which is where I started getting access to care.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, your wife sounds like a pretty incredible person.
I got very lucky.
What was her response? How did she react when she learned that you were going through this? Not that you were even going through this process, but the way you were. You talked about her mentioning your night terrors.
Yeah.
How did she respond to all this?
I don't really know. I guess I just got lucky, because, again, of all the women I had been with in my life, she's the first and only one to really say this is what was happening to me. So her position was, I care about you. this is something that's happening that's beyond the scope of what I can do for you. But the very least I could do is let you know that I'm here for you, whatever it takes. This is what you need to do, but you need to go talk to someone.
Right.
So she was smart enough to know that that was something that was an area that she had no exposure to, no expertise in. And it was beyond the scope of what she could do in the relationship. And that she could only hope that I would take her advice and go talk to someone.
When that therapist was upfront with you and told you that you might be dealing with this, for the rest of your life, what happened after that?
Well, I was, it was a long walk home for one thing, trying to come to terms with it. And quite frankly, it's taken years for me to come to terms with even the fact that I have PTSD. There's still that part of me that wants to deny it. But it was a long process, and I just decided that the best thing I could do is put forth the effort to at least go through to talk about what I was experiencing, to try and figure out how I can navigate this thing so that it won't have power over me, but that I can have power over it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just took a lot of time, a lot of talking, a lot of self reflecting, and a lot of honesty, and ultimately it got down to slowly. And ultimately, it got down to the fact that I had to learn to focus on making decisions that reinforce my values. Because of that, I was able to step aside from the haunting memories or the haunting thoughts that come into my head. And then I can say, if I do this, will it bring me closer to my value, or will it push me further away from the things I value? And so because of little tricks and tools like that I've learned through the years, I've been able to slowly gain control over how PTSD impacts my life.
Wow. I love that. I mean, I think that's pretty profound, and something I think we all should be doing, is really having that type of awareness about whether our actions are moving us closer or further away from our values. You said previously that it took you a while to even admit that you had PTSD, and many times you wanted to deny it. And this might seem, like an obvious question, but for you, what was behind the denying it? Why were you kind of lured to deny it?
I would say maybe being macho, maybe being a former Marine, maybe being a man. We cannot disclose any vulnerabilities. We got to always be Johnny on the spot and grind through it. All these different ideals we have around what it means to be a man or what it means to have served in the military. I was contending with that. And ultimately, the other thing is who likes to think about themselves as being weak, right? And to me, that was probably the biggest challenge. I had to realize that being able to speak your truth is not being vulnerable is not a weakness, it's a strength. And I had to learn that. I had to relearn it over and over again until I got to a place where, okay, I can talk about this thing and be honest with people about it. And it's not a weakness that I'm doing it, it's a strength that I'm doing it.
Were there did you have any fellow Marines who were experiencing similar things?
What's interesting is I have 3 friends who I was real close with back in '83. We were all in Beirut at the same time. And I was the only one who volunteered to go, and I was the one who got fired upon of our group. And after Beirut, I separated from them. We just went our separate ways, or I went my separate way from them. They stayed in contact. 35 years later, we reconnected. So we reconnected a couple years ago in New York City. And they too have the same residual type of effects from that experience. Each of them is dealing with some kind of PTSD or emotional issue in their lives as a result of their exposure to what happened to us. And then I have another friend who was actually in the building the only person out of his room who survived.
Oh, gosh.
We talk about it a lot, and one of the things he says to me over and over again is he he wished he was on my side, and he wished that I could have been on his side, so that I don't, because he has a different type of experience. He's really excitable about things, so it affects us all. In there's subtle differences between the level of impact it has in each of our lives, but each of us has the same kind of thing happening.
Mm-hmm. Just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Dedoceo Habi. His book is called Memoirs in the Moment. All right, let's just pause here for a second to thank our sponsors. All right, we are back. Dedoceo, you talked about this therapist. Were there other therapists that
Yes.
you worked with? Okay.
Yes.
I mean, there's obviously a lot to talk about here, but I am curious about what are some of the things that helped you move through this process and deal with this?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest thing was that I was able to find a therapeutic environment that I felt safe in. One of the benefits that I realized over and over again through the VA is that there's a certain bond that happens with service members that's unlike a bond we may have with like our sibling, our brother or sister who may not have served. And because of this bond, when I walked into some of the VA facilities, some of my initial fears were put to rest.
Mm-hmm.
I felt more secure in those environments just walking in the door. One of the other things that I came to realize is that you have to find a therapist who works with you, who there's a synergy and a trust that happens. Sometimes it happens more quickly than others. But if you don't have that trust, if you don't have that synergy, if you don't have that willingness to be open and honest, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Or if the therapist is not at a place where they really can connect with you or understand where you're coming from, that can do you a disservice because you may find yourself getting more frustrated with what the care that you're getting. So I just had to learn that I had to become my own advocate around my mental health care. And fortunately for me, 99% of those that I came into contact with were good people who really want the best for me, and I could tell it. Mm-hmm. So that was very comforting to me as well.
Was it crucial for you to have a therapist who was in the military and or one who had combat experience? Was that crucial for you?
For me, it was not crucial. What was important was that there could be other veterans who are speaking with that therapist who feel comfortable. Because to me, if the therapist passed that test, right, then I'm trusting of my fellow veterans, then I don't have to worry about it. Now I just have to figure out what my relationship with this therapist would be. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, that was not a priority. The priority for me was finding someone who I could work with who would help me figure out what tools I needed to focus on to build myself up.
Mm-hmm. Now, more specifically in terms of treatment, what did you find helpful? Was it talk therapy, exposure therapy, medication? What?
For me, it's all about meditation. One of the tools I've learned is when I get to a certain anxious place, I have to remove myself from that environment or step away and meditate. Meditation allows me to separate fact and fiction. It allows me to say, wait a minute, there is no sniper up there. That is not going to happen today. Mm-hmm. So this fear that's causing me to want to shut down and step away is unjustified.
Right.
So I had to learn. So meditation gives me the space, and then focusing on my breathing, that helps me with the stress levels as well. So that's been critical to me. I'll do that in a heartbeat, as they say, because I find that has been very helpful to me.
So talk to us about how this book was born, Memoirs in the Moment.
Sure. So as a result of the many, because I've now been actively in therapy for about 12 years now. So as a result of the years, I started talking about my experience in Beirut, first with family members and then with others. And what I discovered is by talking to people from this perspective, not from I got this terrible problem, but this is what happened and this is what I'm doing about it. From that perspective, I felt empowered to do more. So I've always been one to believe in writing and the power of words. And so I want to chronicle my experience in living with PTSD, not from the standpoint of how bad it is, but from the perspective of, wow, this has happened to me and this has been my experience. Mm-hmm. We can always make choices to get us to a better place, which is what I've done. So the genesis of the book was I just wanted to share this story in the hopes that somebody out there could read it and start thinking, you know what? I can take the next step in my journey as well now. Because he did it after he went through all the things he's gone through. And what I need to do is nothing compared to that. Or maybe it might be a lot, but I can take that next step because someone else has done it before me. And that's the whole gist behind the book, is to give people a sense of you can move forward despite whatever challenges you may face. You just have to be willing to do the work and be honest with yourself.
You know, as you're talking, Dedoceo, it sounds so crazy to remember you saying you were in Oakland walking around with a gun, just waiting for someone like to piss you off or whatever.
Yes.
It's all the way right here to hear you talking about beautifully articulating the purpose of this book. I mean, that's it seems like such a distance, doesn't it?
Circle. Yeah, it is. And I'm happy about that. We can always look back and find things to regret and so on and so forth. And I think there's always going to be that. But I choose to look at it from the standpoint of I need to get through the gauntlet to get to where I am today so that I can be a better service, be more authentic to those who I want to help with the work that I'm doing around PTSD.
When you say authentic, what do you mean in that context?
For instance, oftentimes when you're speaking to another person who was in the military about some traumatic experience or their mental health, first thing out many of their mouths is, well, if you haven't been there, you don't know what I'm talking about. And that's a very honest statement. Well, now because I've shared what I've been exposed to, and I've shown that even through all that and all the years of ups and downs, you can get to a better place. Now I can speak with some authority, some authenticity to a veteran who may be just coming out and say, look, I understand exactly how you feel. This is what happened to me, what I've had to overcome. And these are things you need to be mindful of in your journey to getting back to being your complete self.
How did you organize the book?
Chronologically. So it's all about sharing so I go back to the first thought I can remember as a young child in the deep woods of Savannah, Georgia, and what and how I viewed and perceived life then, to the moment in time on 23 October when we lost the service members in Beirut, and how that shift occurred. So I'm going by the various years in my life chronologically to tell a story about how I went from innocent little child to young Marine to angry Marine to homeless civilian to a man about building himself up and reconnecting with his life and reconnecting to what is most important to him, which is family and my values. So it chronicles that entire experience.
You mentioned values a couple times, and I think that was a very kind of strong statement about being aware of whether your actions are moving you toward or away from your values. When did that realization become pertinent for you? Because I could imagine that at some point you were like, I don't even know what the hell my values are, you know?
Right. Yeah. So I have to thank my current doctor for that. I won't give a name to him, but I can say that he has spent a lot of time helping me work through a lot of these different things. And he started doing this exercise with me, whereas when I'm facing a dilemma, in my mind it's dilemma, he'd get a piece of paper, and on one side he'd write the positive result, and on the other side he'd write the negative result. And for me, I'm a very visual person as well. And so we would go through this exercise when he said, okay, you have to make a decision. And you're going to go this way or you're going to go that way. The question is, which of these two directions is the direction that supports your value?
Mm-hmm.
And then when confronted with that, I'm now saying, oh, okay, if I say I'm about my family, then I should call my son. Right? So little things like that. So over time, what happened was I began to see that by doing that exercise and making that a part of how I navigate, how I do things, I'm actually building myself up and I'm building towards the things that I value most so that I can have a relationship with my son, with my daughter, with my mom, with my brothers and sisters. I can have a relationship with my nieces and nephews. I can get out and say hello to a stranger and not feel like this stranger is trying to hurt me. All these different things over time, when I began to see that there is the tangible results of me taking that position, when I was able to see that, it became a part of how I navigate. That's not to say I don't still slip and get caught up, but I can say that when I do slip, now what used to take a couple months or a couple weeks for me to get over can take a couple days or a couple of hours. So I'm able to better manage the realities of my emotional experience because I'm focusing on my values and something bigger than me.
Wow. All right. So as we kind of wind down here, Dedoceo, who's this book for?
This book is for anyone who's gone through any type of traumatic experience, whether it's military or not, because trauma is trauma. There are different degrees of it, but I do believe the human being responds pretty much in the same way to traumatic experiences, or they begin to display the same kinds of behaviors as a result of it if it goes unchecked or unaddressed. So it's for anyone who's dealing with a trauma in their lives, who want to get a sense of what can be accomplished if you just do the work. It's a light read. It's not technical. It's about, I try to have as much fun with it as I can by talking about some of the laughs in my life as such as well. But it's a very honest portrayal of what my life has been from that point to this.
For the therapists, we were obviously a lot of therapists are listening to this of all different kinds, survivors. What suggestions would you have to the therapists who are listening to this in terms of working with veterans? And I would also even go so far as to say working with men who've experienced trauma.
Wow. So I like to think, which is really ironic because there's that part of me that I'm always fighting with, but I like to think that there's goodness in all people, first and foremost. And what happens is life happens and that goodness can get clouded. So what I would do is I would encourage all therapists who are interested in providing services to those with PTSD or military or male to keep pushing forward to create a space where the veteran or the individual can feel safe, can feel that they're being heard, and that you're not making any assumptions, or that you're not just checking A, B, C, D off the list.
Right.
I know that a lot of the evaluations have to deal with scoring and so on and so forth, and that's fine, that's needed. I think though, what a veteran, or what I needed was to be able to talk to someone in a safe place where I can get to a place where I was vulnerable, and I don't know that I could say it was a conscious choice. I just feel that looking back, that's what was needed. That's what I needed. And that's what happened that caused me to feel less fearful about taking the next step in my evolution. So I would say create that kind of space. I've never seen it. I've heard that some therapists have kind of tried to push back on a person's experience. I would say please don't do that, because whether we imagine the experience or whether it really happened in our minds is real to us. Right. And we develop our persona based on what we believe. And so the challenge then becomes, well, how do you navigate that in such a way that you don't, that you keep the person interested in the services that you're offering them. And so that's the challenge. And to me, it's all about being able to acknowledge this is what this person believes right here, right now. While you can see it's not the truth and while it's not real, that's where that person is right now. So we have to kind of walk him or her to a better place.
Awesome. All right, Dedoceo, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
People can reach me through my website, which is memoirs.work, HTTPS, memoirs.work. Okay. They can also learn a little bit about the Beirut experience there, and they can purchase the book. We are on Barnes & Noble, and we are on Amazon. So they can purchase a book from there. But again, they can also get access to helpful things right now on the website. For instance, you can do a survey or self-assessment, if you will, to see if you are dealing with any of the traits of PTSD, that kind of stuff. I want it to be helpful to people right now so that going forward, they can have a place where they can use those resources to continue to build themselves.
Awesome. We'll have all those linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Dedoceo, love to have you back, man. You are awesome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Anytime. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Right, take care. Thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it. And we veterans appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. Take care.